Yes, Benny has a very interesting history as a character. I created him as a cameo. In my first translated novel, Dead Before Dying, I had a protagonist, MBG Apr, who was suffering from depression, and it was a fairly dark book. And I knew I needed something to balance that darkness, and I created a character called Benny Grissel, who was supposed to be a bit of comic relief, a much lighter character. And of course, when you create cameo characters, characters that are supposed to be just on a few pages in a book, then you don't spend as much time thinking about it. So I created a bit of a cliche, the cop who is an alcoholic, but somehow stumbles to success, and that was Benny Grissel. When I started writing and working with Benny, he just became such a fantastic character to work with. Every time he walked onto the page, something happened. He became exciting. He was very funny, and I really got a liking for him. The problem was that by the end of the book, Benny Grissel had a much larger role in Dead Before Dying than I ever envisaged. So when I had finished the book, I knew that somewhere in future I was going to have to bring Benny Grissel back. The problem is that the consequences of creating him as the cliche alcoholic cop meant that when I started writing the first book in which he was the protagonist, called Devil's Peak, I had this problem. Now I had to work with a character that was an alcoholic, a typical genre fiction cop. And I tried to do something different. I tried to really focus on the damage that Benny was doing because of his alcoholism, and how he was struggling to win back his wife and to beat the alcoholic tendencies. And that, I think, endeared him to me even more, because when you work with a character, and especially if you work in the genre, then you're looking for as many sources of suspense as you can find, and conflict being the mother of suspense. If you can have a character with a lot of internal conflict as well, that I think adds to the depth of the character and to the interest that readers may have in the story. You know, I owed Benny, in the two previous books, Benny Grissel had gone through some really bad stuff in Devil's Peak. His wife kicks him out of the house, and she says if he does not sober up, then she doesn't want him back. In 13 hours, she divorces him. At the end of 13 hours, Benny hears that his wife is going to leave him permanently. So I also owed Benny a little bit of resolution in terms of his love life. He needed someone that he can get attached to, and that became a lot of fun because he had met in 13 hours a very famous former singer called Alexa Barnard, and they had an immediate chemistry and a connection. So in 7 days, Benny starts pursuing her. He slowly falls in love with her, but it's very difficult for him because she's an alcoholic too. And that was a dynamic that I really enjoyed writing about, because for the first time, suddenly Benny, being an alcoholic himself, he became the guy who had to look after Alexa and make sure that she stays dry, which was a very new role for him. So that was also part of the development of the story of 7 Days. I also, you know, whenever I do research, I go out, I take my camera, my video camera, my GPS, I go walk the streets that Benny would walk. I go find places and houses. For instance, for the very rich guy who is the power behind this big transaction, I had to go find a house in the very affluent part of Cape Town called Constantia. And that was a lot of fun. I studied aerial photographs. I used Google Earth to do that. And then I went onto websites of estate agents to try and find a house, because you always find nice photographs on estate agent websites, to try and find a house that was big in terms of the land that it occupied, but also very beautiful, to help me to describe that kind of house. Yes, Sean Bean has signed on. If the movies are made, he will be Benny Grissel. But you have to understand that the movie making process is a very slow one. What happens first is that a production company options your book, which means they have the right for 12 or 18 or 24 months to develop the movie project. But it's a very slow moving project. First of all, they have to get the script written, because without a script they can't go find the cast, they can't attach a director, and only once they've done that, then they go look for funding. And funding an international movie is a very difficult and a very complicated thing and a very slow thing to happen. So there's no guarantee at this stage that either 7 days or 13 hours will become a movie. But Sean Bean has signed up to be Benny Griessel, and I would be absolutely delighted if he did play the role. I admire him as an actor very much, and to me the interesting thing is that he looks a little bit like the way I envisaged Benny Griessel to look. So I would be absolutely delighted.
What inspired you to write Cobra?
I don't believe in inspiration as much as perspiration. You know, if one had to wait around for inspiration, you would never get a novel done. Developing stories, developing new books is really just hard work. It's going out, collecting story ideas. I mean, that becomes a way of life, I think, for all authors. And then taking those story ideas that you really like and trying to fit them together. In this case, the original story idea came from a New York Times article on, it was really an expose on the American Department of Justice and the CIA, who created an algorithm that was sniffing out terrorists in the international financial sector, in the banking system. But a book is never just one story element. You know, you've got to keep adding other stuff. If you only have one story element, then it's probably only a short story. A novel needs more than that. So there were other elements that finally got together to create Cobra. And it was really, you know, hard work. You got to chip away at it. You have to keep working at it. Well, the book kicks off with Benny Griessel, a Hawks detective, looking into the murder of 3 people in a guest house in Franschhoek. 2 of the guys who are killed are very lean military types. The other one is a worker at the guest house, but there's a 4th person in the house that is gone, and they don't know who he is. They find a false passport of a British citizen, and they really don't know who he is. The other part of the story is a pickpocket by the name of Tyrone Kleinboy, who steals something at the Cape Town waterfront. He steals the purse of an American tourist. What he does not know is that there is something very valuable to some very bad people in the purse. The 2 stories are connected, and the book is really about how they're connected and the chase to find the pickpocket before the bad people kill him. Benny is like a comfortable old shoe that I get back to. He's such a wonderful character because he really makes things happen on the page. You know, he's exciting, he's idiosyncratic and a bit eccentric. Benny is trouble. I mean, he's always got personal trouble in his life. He makes trouble in his job. So he's a real fun character to work with, and I love going back to him.
Now, for those people who don't know Benny, Benny does have a large following. Can you tell us a little bit more about him? What can people expect when meeting Benny in the book?
Well, Benny is a 45-year-old detective at the Hawks. He was a heavy drinking alcoholic for 13 years. He's now been on the wagon for a few years, but his relationship with the bottle is the big trouble in his life. He's divorced. He's trying to patch up his relationship with his 2 kids. He's also fallen in love with a former very famous singer and also alcoholic that he, in Cobra, he has moved in with her, and that means more trouble for Benny. He's a man with a lot of inner demons. He has got a bit of self-hatred, but he's a really brilliant cop. And he's got a bit of an obsession to find the bad guys.
You only really need to get to know and understand a character when you're writing about him or her. And when you hear her speaking and you know what they're thinking in terms of the story. And they become like real people to you. I mean, to me, they become very real. I spend 12 months in the writing process with these people. Research never ends. For me, the research only ends when I finish the book. But during the whole process of writing, I continue to do research. What is great about that is that when you discover something new in your research, then you get ideas for the story as well, and you actually take that and it makes the story take an interesting turn. What were the major psychological things in their life that turned them into what they are when you meet them on the page for the first time? My view of people and of human beings is that we all have the capacity for good and evil. And I think boring too. I don't think readers are interested in one-dimensional characters who only do good or only do bad. I don't create the character so that he must be liked.
I'm trying to create a character that is as human as possible so that some people can dislike him or her and other people can like, because that's what the real world is about. We like some people and some people are just different from us, so we don't like them all that much. My business is not to judge them. My job is to create them as believable and credible human beings and allow them then to interact, allow them to dislike each other or like each other, to fall in love, to kill each other or to fight one another. But my job is to create this world, to create this landscape in which this can happen. You can't walk in this landscape without the landscape influencing you. And I like to think that the landscape becomes another character in my books, and a character with a very strong personality. Now, the new book that I'm writing now, there's a gangster, a Cape Flat gangster, who has budgies, but he does something very bad with the budgies. I can't tell you now. I don't want to speak in front of the bird. I don't want to hurt his feelings, but this bad guy, he does some bad stuff with budgies. In a car, you just go, but in a motorcycle, you are immersed in the landscape, and that is something that I love.
Johannesburg, 'n wêreldstad, Hollywood en Kaapstad, die jollers bly laat wakker, veral hier in die